What's up guys, Brand from Bloody Breakdown coming back at you. Gonna be doing another episode in our ranked series, and in this episode we're gonna be looking at the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So 9 entries, not quite as bad as the Friday the 13th ranked was, maybe not quite as quick as the Scream franchise was. So keep in mind guys, this is just my opinion. This isn't the authority, obviously. I am not the arbiter of everything Nightmare on Elm Street, just my opinion. So let's go ahead and begin with number 9. At the very bottom of the list, at number 9 position, I am going to start things off with, in my opinion, the least effective film in the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, that being Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Now, maybe I'll make a video in the future talking about this kind of an aside for right now. A lot of times I feel like the 5th entry in horror franchises tend to be some of the weakest. And Freddy, no different here, bud. I found this movie to be everything that was wrong with Part 4 amplified. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Part 4. I think there was a lot of flaws in that one. I definitely, as you can tell, I'm going to rank it higher than this Dream Child. But I was not interested in the plot. I felt like Freddy's demise was ridiculous, which, I mean, is the case in a couple of these films. It had just gotten to the point to where, I don't mind there being comedy in my Nightmare on Elm Street film. Similar with like other franchises like Child's Play. I don't mind it. But it seemed to be a little bit too much. The plot seemed to just, it didn't really make much sense. I don't know. It's really hard to put my finger on why I dislike this movie so much. But unfortunately, it's just not for me. So that's going to be at number 9, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. I'm sorry to show you guys that the artwork's pretty good. I like the artwork, if I can say something nice. Alright, coming in at number 8 is, of course, I think everyone knew it was going to rank pretty low. The reboot or the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. That was pretty country, not Myrrh. Yeah, I think this one's kind of self-explanatory, to be perfectly honest with you. There's a lot of issues. Wasn't a big fan of the new guy playing Freddy. Didn't like I hate to be the guy who complains about CGI being used in something, because I'm usually not that guy. But it really wasn't very effective in this film. It just goes to show you how much practical effects are a whole lot more effective, especially when it comes to makeup on your movie monsters. But hey, that's just my opinion. At this point in the series, Freddy had kind of become the guy you cheer for, not so much the protagonist anymore. And then, throwing on the whole pedophilia thing. Kind of hard to cheer for a pedophile, just throwing it out there. So maybe that was an odd call. I know it was alluded to in the first one, but I don't know. This one just, it doesn't cut it for me either. So coming in at number 7 is the Nightmare on Elm Street that's referred to as the homosexual Nightmare on Elm Street, the gay Nightmare on Elm Street. And if anyone's seen it, you probably know why some people call it that, but it is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddys Revenge. Now for me, I really don't care as far as, the movie goes, if, people think it's a gay movie or not. Of course, there's a lot of things in the movie that I see how they believe it. But for me, when I'm looking at this movie, the main thing I see is this is not Freddy Krueger from the first film, which is the only thing you had seen up until this point, this being the first sequel. The whole dream thing's kind of thrown out the window. He's looking for a body to come into the real world in. Why wasn't he doing this in the first film? Does it even really make sense to do this, considering in the first movie and in later sequels, his weakness is coming into the real world? So that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's very different. To me, it's almost kind of like the Halloween 3 of the series, but at least they had Freddy Krueger. I don't know, it really doesn't work for me. It doesn't build upon the mythos that we created with the first one, and none of the others to follow either. So for me, that's kind of why it's a bit of a weak addition. Coming in at number 6 is Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. I think first and foremost, not being able to get Patricia Arquette back from 3, her replacement Tuesday Night, in my opinion, not being very effective. This movie had a lot of issues filming, if I'm not mistaken. You know, we're getting closer to the upper echelon here, or maybe the middle would be more appropriate. It's not that I loathe this movie like I kind of feel about certain aspects of some of the ones I've put below on the list. I think this one just kind of falls, you know, maybe flutters around the middle for me, but on the side of it's not really one of my favorites. I think 4 and 5 were definitely a down period for me in the series, especially number 5. So that's why we're falling where we are at number 6 with part 4. Alright, so coming in at number 5, and this one kind of barely, I guess, narrows out part 4 for the number 5 spot itself, but that's going to be Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare. And, you know, this one's very strange to me too. 4 and 5 had a very similar feel in a lot of the tone. 6, where it does retain a bit of it, it does feel very different. And for me, I kind of liked it a little bit more than 4 and a lot more than 5. So out of that era, it's probably my favorite one out of that 3 movie era. Some interesting cameos. We even have Johnny Depp doing a cameo, returning from the first one, but he's playing himself in this one. I don't know. It is one of those movies for me that kind of lingers around the middle. There's not a whole lot to complain about, but there's not a whole lot to praise it for. So that's why it comes in where it comes in at number 5, and we'll move on to number 4. And I'm sure I'm going to catch a little bit of flack for this one, but at number 4, I'm putting Freddy vs. Jason. And like I said, there are a lot of people out there that absolutely despise this movie. And hey, I can honestly understand where they're coming from. The acting is atrocious. I wasn't a big fan of the director. I forget his name. He also directed Bride of Chucky, which is another movie I'm not huge on. But at the end of the day, guys, you know, whatever you want to say about the film, it's a movie that us horror fans waited a decade for. And as far as the fight scenes between Freddy and Jason, I love them. I love a lot of the kills in this movie. I think just being able to say that it happened, and maybe it's not a good movie. Maybe it's not. But to me, it's nostalgic. It's like nostalgia on top of nostalgia. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. I don't think we're ever really going to see big slasher icons have crossover films ever again. So it is something special to at least me, and, you know, I know a lot of people hate it, so maybe it's a guilty pleasure. So that's why it is number 4. But coming in at number 3, we're getting into the top 3 now, and this is where things got a little difficult for me, because these last 3 remaining Nightmare films, I really enjoy all of them. But after some thinking about it, number 3 is going to be Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, this to me is probably the most well shot and written, I believe, quite possibly, in some aspects. The only thing I didn't really like about it is, once again, it's almost like a, you know, I don't mind whenever we do different universes in horror films. It happens so much. It's happening in the new Halloween coming out. But, you know, Nightmare had kind of been one of those series that was just like, okay, look, here's the timeline. And even if things don't make sense all the time, there's a timeline. There's kind of like a cogent canon. So this one kind of threw that askew, which, you know, sometimes you have to do that to be able to produce a good movie. I know that when you get so far deep into these films, so many different things have happened. There's been so much character development on the antagonist, usually, in the horror slasher genre. So sometimes you do have to kind of start fresh, and in this one they did that, acknowledging the other movies as movies, and it was something different. And Freddy maybe isn't quite Freddy, you know what I'm saying, but at least his appearance and embodiment is that. It kind of gave me a feel like for something like Pennywise in the It films, where he's not really a clown, that's just the appearance he's taking on. So kind of reminiscent of that, but I enjoyed it enough to put it in my top 3. So, speaking of 3, coming in at number 2 is Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. And, you know, for me, I don't think there's a horror fan out there that doesn't mention this movie as being one of the best in the franchise. You're always going to have people talking about the first one and the third one in a positive light, for the most part. And when you look at it, I mean, Patricia Arquette, fantastic performance. Heather Langenkamp comes back after missing from the sequel that didn't really make any damn sense, honestly, so I guess that part actually makes sense. It's just well done. Some of the characters, you know, in it are uber 80s, over the top, you know, dream stuff. But I guess, you know, when you're dealing with dreams, some of that's to be, you're going to have that. But so, you know, it really is probably, the general consensus is that it's one of the better Nightmare on Elm Street films. A lot of people would put it at the top, I'm sure. But for me, that's the number 2 movie, because the number 1 movie, and you know, I always am fair about these things because it's my opinion. I'm not trying to win any hearts and minds over, just giving out my opinion. That's all I'm doing here. So I try not to always go with originals if I really don't feel like they're the best movie in the franchise. But like I said, I put a lot of thinking into this, and after some digging and analyzing the franchise, I still feel like the original Nightmare on Elm Street is the best in the franchise. And, you know, a lot of that has to do with Wes Craven. A lot of that has to do with the performances we get from some of the young actors in the film, like Heather Langenkamp and Johnny Depp. So, you know, I think it was well done. I think it was well written. I think it was well directed, well shot. You know, I'm kind of with most people on this film. The only true gripe that I have, the only complaint that I can ever muster about this film is the ending. And we all know the ending was pretty much a big cluster. So, you know, so you win some, you lose some, I guess. I know there was a big disagreement between Wes and New Line about how they wanted to end it, but, you know, maybe the ending's not a winner. Maybe it's not. I'll grant you that, because the mom's body being pulled through the door, you know, when it's like an obvious blow-up doll or whatever. So, you know, maybe you didn't win with the ending. But damn it, everything from beginning right up until the end of that movie is fantastic. So thank you, Wes Craven. Rest in peace, by the way. And that is number 1. That'll round out my ranking of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, feel free, please leave me a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the notification bell if you haven't already done so. Drop me a comment down below letting me know what you think about my ranking. Let me know what your ranking is. And definitely, guys, check the description section, because there's a couple of links to follow me on Instagram or Twitter. I've got a new group page up on Facebook, and even my Patreon if you'd like to support this channel financially. So, with that said, I'm Brian with Bloody Breakdown, and we'll catch you next time.